$100 trillion in debt needs to be replaced by 2027. Most of it was borrowed when interest rates were basically zero. They're not zero anymore. They're 5 times higher. And here's the thing nobody's talking about. This has happened before. It was called Japan. They've been stuck for 34 years. Now the entire world just made the exact same mistake, except we started with way more debt than they did. Imagine you have a credit card. You borrowed $10,000 at 2% interest. That cost you $200 a year. Manageable, right? Now that bill comes due. You need to borrow again to pay it off. But this time, the interest rate isn't 2% anymore. It's 5%. So now that same $10,000 costs you $500 a year. You didn't spend any new money. You literally just replaced old debt with new debt. But now you're paying 2.5 times more. Every year. Forever. That's what's happening to entire countries right now. Japan walked face first into this trap in 1990. Their economy was booming, then their asset bubble popped. They lowered interest rates to zero to make borrowing cheap again. The economy would recover, they said. This is temporary, they said. 34 years later, they're still at zero. They've tried everything, negative interest rates, the central bank buying stocks, printing money like it was going out of style. Nothing worked. Not because the policies were bad, but because once you're in the trap, there's no way out. The economy never collapsed. It just stopped. Froze in place. And here's the fun part. The rest of the world just did exactly what Japan did, except we started with 3 times more debt than they had. After the 2008 crash, nobody was spending money. Banks weren't lending. Businesses weren't hiring. The economy was basically frozen. Governments had one move: make borrowing so cheap that people can't resist. If loans are basically free, people borrow. If they borrow, they spend. If they spend, the economy recovers. And it worked, kind of. Governments borrowed at 1% interest. Companies refinanced their debt for almost nothing. People bought houses with 3% mortgages. Everyone agreed this was temporary. It lasted 12 years. Then COVID hit. Governments borrowed trillions more. Stimulus checks went out. Business loans were forgiven. It was like Oprah was running monetary policy. Everyone gets money. And for about a year, it worked exactly as designed. Then prices started going up. By 2022, inflation was running at 8, 9, sometimes 10%. Central banks had to fight it. Their only weapon? Raise interest rates. So they did. Fast. Faster than they had in 40 years. Remember that credit card example? Let's scale it up. You're a government. Over the past 10 years, you borrowed $10 trillion at 2% interest. That's $200 billion a year. Expensive but manageable. Now those loans are expiring. You need to borrow again. But interest rates aren't 2% anymore. They're 5%. So now you're paying $500 billion a year. Just on interest. Just to stay in the same place. That's $300 billion that used to build roads, fund hospitals, and pay teachers. Gone. Vanished into interest payments. And it gets worse, because every 6 months, another chunk of debt expires, and every time it gets replaced with something more expensive. The United States now spends more on interest payments than it does on its entire military. Let that one marinate for a second. Companies have the same problem. A business borrowed money at 2% in 2020. That loan expires in 2025. Now they refinance at 6%. Their interest payments just tripled. But their revenue didn't. So what do? They don't go bankrupt. They just adjust. Hiring freeze, cancel the new office, delay the product launch. Now multiply that across every company in the economy. You don't get a crash. You get stagnation. The economy doesn't shrink. It just stops growing. And consumers, same story. Your mortgage resets. Your credit card interest rate climbs. You don't default. You just spend less. Cancel the vacation, keep the old car another year, just quietly, persistently, everywhere at once, everyone's spending a little less, which is how growth dies. Not with a bang, with a whimper. In 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed on a Monday morning. By Friday, the global financial system was frozen. It was fast. It was visible. This is different. A government bond expires. They issue a new one at a higher rate. Markets open the next day. Everything seems fine. 6 months later, another bond expires. Same thing. Life goes on, but underneath, the pressure is building. Countries that could afford their debt at 2% are struggling at 5%. They don't declare bankruptcy. They just quietly reschedule things. The new bridge gets delayed. The hospital expansion becomes a future consideration. No press conference, no headlines. It just happens. And because it's slow, because it's boring, nobody notices until it's too late, which is exactly what happened to Japan. So if this is such a big problem, why don't countries just fix it? There are 3 theoretical ways to escape a debt trap. Option 1, grow your way out. But when your debt costs 5% and your economy is only growing at 2%, you're not growing out of anything. You're falling behind. Option 2, print money. Create inflation to make your debt less burdensome. Except when you do that, prices go up. Central banks raise interest rates to fight inflation, which makes your debt more expensive. You're running in place while slowly drowning. Option 3, just don't pay. Default. Except government bonds are the foundation of the entire global financial system. Pension funds own them. Banks use them as collateral. If those bonds become worthless, everything built on top of them collapses. So you can't grow out. You can't inflate out. You can't default. You can only keep making payments forever or until something breaks. There's a term economists use for this, financial repression, which sounds professional until you realize it's just a fancy way of saying slowly squeezing the life out of the economy for decades. Wages stagnate, innovation slows, infrastructure decays, governments spend more on interest and less on literally everything else. But nobody calls it a crisis, because it doesn't feel like one. It just feels like everything costs more and works worse, like you're working harder and getting less. Let's go back to Japan. In 1989, their stock index hit a record high. It took 34 years to get back to that level. 34 years. That's an entire generation that graduated college, built careers, had kids, and retired without ever experiencing what their parents called economic prosperity. Japan threw everything at this problem. 0 rates, negative rates, the central bank buying stocks directly, quantitative easing before it had a name, and none of it worked. You can't print your way out of demographics. You can't lower rates enough to make people have more children. And now, the entire developed world has the same problem Japan had in 1990, except we're starting with more debt, worse demographics, and central banks that already used up their tools. Pay attention to the language central banks use now. They don't talk about hitting inflation targets anymore. They talk about maintaining financial stability. That's not a random word choice. When $100 trillion needs to find new buyers, the primary concern isn't whether inflation is at 2 or 3%. It's whether anyone will keep buying the bonds. In 2019, the Federal Reserve tried to stop buying bonds and let the market function normally. Markets immediately panicked. Within months, the Fed reversed course. That was the moment everyone learned. The system can't survive without constant life support anymore. The patient isn't healing, we're just keeping them on the machines. After World War II, government debt was higher than it is now, but the economy absorbed it. Why? The post-war boom, young population, new technologies, global trade exploding. The debt became manageable not because it got smaller, but because the economy grew so fast around it. We don't have that this time. Birth rates are falling everywhere. Productivity growth has slowed. The big easy wins already happened. Maybe AI saves us. Maybe fusion power. But maybe isn't a plan. It's a prayer. And you can't run a global economy on prayer. And it's not just one country. The United States has $34 trillion in official debt. Add in unfunded liabilities, try $200 trillion. Europe's banks are holding bonds from countries that can barely afford their interest payments. China has $13 trillion in hidden local government debt that's not even on the books. When one country has a debt crisis, others can help. But when everyone has the same problem at the same time, there's nobody left to call. There is historical precedent for what happens when every major economy carries too much debt simultaneously. It was the 1930s. The Great Depression wasn't just stock markets crashing. It was a decade where nothing worked. Governments tried stimulus, then austerity, then stimulus again. Nothing produced lasting recovery. You know what finally ended it? World War II. The war forced governments to abandon all fiscal restraint, And somehow, the economy that couldn't grow during 15 years of peace roared to life during the largest war in human history. The last time the world had debt this high, it took the most destructive conflict in human history to reset the system. That's not a solution, that's a warning, and we're ignoring it. The strange thing is how normal everything feels right now. Markets are open, governments are selling bonds, people are getting mortgages, life continues. But the foundation underneath has fundamentally shifted. For 12 years, the system was stable because money was free. Every business plan, every government budget, every pension fund was built on that assumption. Now the assumption is gone, and everyone's pretending nothing changed. It's like playing Jenga. The bottom blocks have been removed, but the tower is still standing, for now, and everyone's very carefully not touching it, hoping that if we all just stay very still, physics will forget how to work. Here's the thing about economies. They don't just run on math, they run on belief. If people believe the system works, it works. They invest, they plan for the future, they take risks. But if that belief breaks, if people stop trusting that their money will be worth something, that their government can pay its debts, the math stops mattering. That's what killed the economy in the 1930s. It wasn't the stock crash. The problem was that trust evaporated. People expected banks to fail, so they pulled their money out, which caused banks to fail. Fear became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right now, trust is still holding, but trust is like a dam. It holds back enormous pressure, and it holds perfectly right up until the moment it doesn't. Once it cracks, it doesn't slowly leak. It breaks all at once. The Great Depression wasn't a single event. It was a decade of problems compounding on top of each other, each crisis making the next one harder to solve. This time, the debt is bigger, the populations are older, the tools to fight it are already exhausted. It might not look like 1929. There probably won't be bread lines, banks probably won't fail in droves, but that doesn't mean an entire generation won't be defined by it. It might just look different, infrastructure that never gets built, wages that don't keep up with costs, retirement ages that keep climbing, public services that work a little worse every year. Not an explosion, not a collapse, just a permanent state of things being slightly worse than they used to be, every year, for decades. The timer started in 2022 when interest rates went up. Most people didn't notice. Why would they? Nothing exploded, no banks failed, life went on, but the math doesn't care whether you noticed. It doesn't care whether you believe in it, it just keeps counting down.